My first ever job was working at GameStop. Thanks to a lack of oversight by my first boss, I was hired at 16 years old without any restrictions because by the time the paperwork went through, it was too late to make any changes. I was in. "If anyone asked, you're 18, was all he said. Sure, I could have fixed it later, but who wants to deal with all that? And besides, I wanted to work and maximize my time earning money. I wanted to go to movies with friends and of course to afford the games I wanted to play. And the proposition of working around games and being the first to know about everything happening was an intoxicating feeling. I was already treating E3 like it was the center point of my summers. Why not pad my pockets while doing what I was already doing? This was the peak of the Xbox 360 and PS3 wars where Sony was finally taking the fight to Microsoft and releasing hits like Uncharted 3, The Last of Us, Infamous 2, and Little Big Planet 2. Not to be defeated easily, Xbox was striking back with Forza 4, Gears of War 3, and Halo 4. It was an exciting time to play games, and it was fun working around it. You had a healthy mix of quality releases, and that's not even counting the third-party games of the time. But one thing no one tells you about when you get your first job, especially one that revolves around a hobby, is that working with something changes your relationship to it, no matter how passionate you are about the thing you are working with. For instance, when I worked as a barista, I didn't initially care all that much about coffee, but over time, as you learn more and more about how the sausage is made, you get to know too much. Like if you order a standard cup of coffee, that liquid costs the company around 10 to 25 cents per cup. And while I grew to love coffee and appreciate the flavors and complexities that go into a roast, even your run-of-the-mill local cafe, I still got a bit more hesitant when someone asked me to stop and get coffee somewhere. I realized, I'd rather not pay $3 for a cup of coffee. I'd rather buy a bag myself, grind the beans at home, and make myself the freshest cup possible. And Starbucks is swill, fight me. Or, more relevant to this video, is creating a YouTube channel that orbits around games. You're still playing games, but every game you play gets viewed through the lens of creating content. Or if you aren't playing a game you want to make a video about, it's easy to start feeling guilty for not playing something that you could be making a video about. Ask any creator and they will probably say the same thing, no matter what their niche is. Working at GameStop when you're in high school is an appealing concept because you get to be around games and make money for it. You get an employee discount, you can check out games for a week so you can get familiar with the product, and you often work with people who are just as passionate about games as you are. One of my best friends who has appeared on this channel before was a friend I made through my years at GameStop. But the games you are exposed to at work are filtered through a very specific lens of its own, one that makes GameStop as much money as possible. There is a corporate concept known as the GameStop Circle of Life, a loop you want to get customers in on so they can become loyal customers while being able to maximize company profit off of used game sales. The circle starts with a new game purchase. Say day one, a customer comes in and buys the latest Call of Duty. GameStop doesn't make a lot of cash off that sale because they only take a small percentage of the game and the publisher and company that made it get the rest. When the customer leaves, you're encouraged to tell them that when they get bored with their new game, bring it back with some older games and they can get credit towards something else. Trade-ins do two things. They give customers store credit, which ensures they come back, and it gives them inventory to resell at nearly 100% profit. Back when I worked there, a traded game that came out within the year would, without a specific deal, net you basically $22 in store credit, or worse, $18 in cash. And the amount of times you were allowed to trade for cash were limited by local pawn laws, as my GameStops were. They would sell that game you traded for $55. Just $5 off of what a new game would cost. The difference is that selling that game now removes the developers, and that $33 all goes to GameStop. It's all profit. That is significantly more than what they would get from selling a new copy. And since the customer has stored credit, they're likely to buy a game that isn't covered entirely by that credit, meaning they spend more money. But hey, if you like Call of Duty, why don't you put down that store credit toward a reservation of the next game you're looking forward to, probably ensuring that you'll come buy it from us and no one else. Everything is in service to the circle of life. Memberships are just adding incentives to get customers into the loop. After 4 years on the job and working into the dawn of the PS4 Xbone era, almost all of the video game media I had been consuming was distilled through GameStop's corporate lens, whether it was announcement of new games to push reservations for, or the endless stream of trailers through GameStop TV. I recall this conversation with one of my coworkers about games we were playing on our consoles and what we were looking forward to coming up. At that time, I had barely left the store to do anything besides go to school. I wasn't really given a lot of time to even play games, so when I did get a chance, I wanted to make it count. Oh, and another thing people don't warn you about with your first part-time job is that if your boss is scheduling you for so many shifts that you should be qualifying for full-time benefits and your college grades are slipping because of it, it's okay to say, stop doing that. And I distinctly remember the end of the conversation we were having because it never left my mind. The words rattling me to my core. After confessing that I wasn't really wowed by the gameplay of The Last of Us and I would have preferred it to have been a movie or a TV show, a take that aged like whatever's the opposite of milk, and how after playing GTA 5 on PS3, I hadn't found anything that really grabbed me. After seeing how a lot of the major publishers were shifting to more narratively focused games and selling realistic graphics over innovative gameplay, Uncharted 4 a prime example, the shine was starting to come off the apple. And he said exactly this. So in 10 years, you probably won't be playing games anymore. That had never even crossed my mind. I mean, what else would I do with my time? And he was probably right at the time of the conversation, had things gone a little bit differently. All I really wanted was more of what I was playing on the Vita, not games from Sony, who forgot the child like Oedipus's father abandoning his child in the woods, hoping he'd die, but from smaller developers who were creating smaller, more artistically experimental experiences that GameStop didn't care about. They often weren't on disc or cartridge, so they couldn't reap the pre-owned trade value off of them. Even the digital-only games that broke through to the mainstream early, like Super Meat Boy, Fez, and Castle Crashers, were rarely ever discussed at the store because selling a Microsoft Points card was essentially worthless to the bottom line. I was craving bright and vibrant colors and exciting chiptunes and upbeat music, both lost in the gray color palettes and orchestral scores of the GameStop channel. Eventually, my grades slipped far enough that I quit the GameStop job, allowing me to focus on not failing out of college. But being a full-time student and not spending 45 hours a week in a store also allowed me to pick gaming back up. And if I was going to rekindle my love of gaming, it was going to have to come from finding games for myself instead of solely consuming whatever GameStop was focusing on at the time. Here I am, more than 10 years after that conversation, and not only am I playing more games than ever, I am finishing more games than I ever did when I was growing up. The reason is pretty simple. Indie games rekindled my love of gaming. Variety is the spice of life, as they say, and indie games really brought me the variety I was desperately wanting. When I quit GameStop, I had to start going out of my way to find games that would click with me. And eventually, through word of mouth and YouTube, I discovered a few games that really had me enthralled. I found out about one of my favorite games ever, Shovel Knight, watching Game Grumps. And I got it on Vita as soon as it came out, playing all the way through between classes and at home when I wasn't studying. So at a certain point, I was playing some games I really loved, but it wasn't until later after I graduated college that I really realized how important indie games were to the health of the gaming landscape. When I started this channel in 2019, I wanted to focus on the idea that games used to be fun and they lost their way. It's why I was initially so adamant that I only wanted to play games older than PS3 and Xbox 360 here. In retrospect, this was a stupid, short-sighted byproduct of the lens I'd been viewing games through at GameStop. People were enjoying games the whole time, I just didn't find what I wanted to play. And since they weren't what GameStop cared about, I wrongly assumed they didn't exist. But that really started to change when I started paying attention to games ported to Switch. I was in the middle of my love affair with the console for its portability and ability to bring console-like experiences on the go. But once I finished Breath of the Wild and Mario Odyssey, what was I going to play? I started checking the eShop every week, and I really started to get my foot in the door with what indie games had to offer. They rekindled my love of games in a way that was not only accessible via download, but affordable as well. There were so many games to play for less than $30 a piece, and more often than not they were on sale for around $10. That really lowered the barrier to entry. When I bought Doom on Switch with another game, I remember that gut punch of realizing, that was $120 for 2 games. But I could buy a couple of indie games for under $30 and not feel so much pressure to beat and resell them to take advantage of some trade-in promo. Within my first few years with the Switch, I played Stardew Valley, Binding of Isaac, Cave Story Plus, Overcooked, Golf Story, Axiom Verge, and Enter the Gungeon, Hollow Knight. All of these great games had either been inaccessible to me before Switch or simply didn't cross my path until they came to the console. Since my Switchual awakening, indie games have only become more and more elevated into the public consciousness. As the creator economy online has grown, how games are raised into the spotlight is more democratized than ever. A streamer or YouTuber can pluck a game from total obscurity and reveal it to tens of thousands of people overnight. And if you're looking for a specific type of game, there's probably someone with your interest exploring new genres that are right up your alley. I deleted all social media off my phone, and while I don't miss scrolling and my brain finally feels like it's healing, the one thing I miss more than anything is starting a dialogue about the games I loved or discovered recently and can't stop thinking about. You can find so much good stuff by saying something like, "I enjoyed Silent Hill," and then seeing someone respond, "Check out Crow Country for a retro-inspired survival horror fix." Going forward, I think indie games are only going to grow in popularity as AAA and now quadruple A games take longer and longer to come out. Games are just taking an eternity. GTA 6 is 12 years in the making. Cyberpunk 2077 was a disaster and still took years to become playable after 8 full years of development. Starfield pushed back the dev cycle of the next Elder Scrolls game and still was met with incredibly mixed reception. While I'm not worried that I'm going to fall out of love with games again, I do find myself questioning the diminishing returns of these massive games with absurdly long and expensive development cycles. But I also think that opens up a huge avenue for some great indie devs to swoop in and get some recognition. We've already seen a little of this with Balatro elbowing its way into the Game of the Year conversation at the Game Awards. It sold enough that even the people who pay a lot to be at the VGAs had to take notice. I would absolutely not be shocked if we end with an indie game or two that we haven't even heard of yet, making a case for Game of the Year 2025. But you've heard about Balatro and Stardew Valley. What about some indie games that I have played that haven't gotten a lot of attention? I think now is a good time to celebrate some of my favorites that have flown under the radar. Detention is a 2D political horror game about growing up under martial law in 1960s Taiwan. You play as a young student who is trying to survive an incoming typhoon while she's trapped at school with no way to get home in the storm. As the story slowly reveals itself through puzzles and clues, you start to see how the government is arresting people on the grounds of anti-state activities, particularly at the school as a teacher abruptly leaves under mysterious circumstances. The artwork is particularly gorgeous, and it's just terrifying at all times. You always think something is right around the corner ready to come get you. What If Car, but squishy? This is a nostalgic pick for sure, but I used to play Jelly Car on the school computers and on my phone all the time, and this new release is just so fun to play. The physics are used to create creative puzzles and levels that challenge you to get to the goal. It can be completed in 1 or 2 sittings, so it's a good relaxing game that isn't going to overstay its welcome. If a job sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Brian Pasternak finds that out the hard way in Yuppie Psycho, a game where your performance review hinges on successfully killing the witch that has been haunting the mega company Sintracorp for years. As you go from floor to floor wasting demons, you get closer and closer to the truth. Later Alligator is a visual novel investigation game where you are trying to help the skittish alligator Pat, who thinks his family is going to have him sleeping with the fishes at the mysterious event. This game lives and dies by the quality of its writing, and this game hits so hard. Through fourth wall breaks and clever dialogue, this game rises to one of the funniest games I've ever played. Imagine every character talking with the Jersey accent of Paulie Walnuts from The Sopranos for extra emphasis. College Bowl is a single developer project that puts the fun back into football games that has desperately been lacking. It's not a simulation, but neither is Madden. It's light on penalties and animations and focuses on the meat and potatoes of arcade football. The best feature that puts it slightly above the pro football version that came before it, Legend Bowl, is the Dynasty mode that lets you take any college of your choice and build them into an all-time contender through upgrading your campus and making it more attractive to potential recruits. I tried to do a rebuild of Tulane that brought them back to greatness. Instead, my coach was fired after 3 seasons. Perfect game. This is probably under the umbrella of cozy games. You are a small alligator who grows up playing imaginary adventure games with your older sister. Later, when she comes back from college and is too busy with schoolwork to play games, our little gator recruits all the neighborhood kids to create the largest scale adventure game this island has ever seen. Something your sister can't possibly ignore. It's a sweet little game, and it's sure to put a smile on your face. In a not-so-distant dystopia, players are selected to partake in a live-streamed game of life and death stakes as they infiltrate a skyscraper with 10 seconds to reach the elevator at the other end of each floor. Running out of time means death, but you gain more time by crushing energy drinks and shooting robots. If they can reach the top of the skyscraper and reach the influencer, they win a new pair of sneakers. This is adrenaline to the max, and each level is different enough that it stays fresh. A serial killer is on the loose and targeting people attending parties. You are that serial killer. Take out all the party goers without getting killed or arrested in levels that randomly select different hazards and traps. From the minds of the cult classic browser game Kingdom of Loathing comes West of Loathing, a Western-themed RPG where you leave home to travel the uncharted plains. You can choose between 3 different classes to start as: Snake Oiler, Cow Puncher, and Bean Slinger. This game plays a lot like if you were playing a single-player session of D&D where it's just you and the Dungeon Master, where the narrator is directly addressing you and often begging you not to stick your hands into spittoons looking for treasure. It's not a hardcore RPG in any capacity, but the writing and hilarious situations you often find yourself in are worth the ride. A humanoid robot awakens on a spaceship, no memory of what has happened outside of occasional flashes of images of the past. As she explores the ship to find the pilot, mutated beings attack and she must overcome them and solve puzzles to get closer and closer to the truth. It feels a lot like classic Resident Evil in space, and there are multiple endings depending on the actions you choose to do along the way. My version of the ending ripped my heart out. It was so well done. A kid gets a job as a taxi driver in order to get access to a car to drive to space. Need I say more? This Metal Gear Solid spoof recounts Jesse Fox's escape from a military base as told via a road trip story. The game pokes fun at the many different stealth games tropes that have appeared over the years, and offers you the chance to fill in some of the blanks of the story that affect the types of bosses and hazards you'll come across. This one is a lot of fun, and as a fan of Metal Gear Solid who thinks those games are brilliant, I can appreciate a game that also keeps its tongue in its cheek about the more ridiculous parts of the series. If you were a child of the 90s like I was, you'll know collectathon platformers were everywhere, featuring jumping Italian plumbers and bears with a bird in their backpack. Instead, Yellow Taxi Goes Vroom puts you in the driver's seat of a car that must collect gears to uncover a conspiracy to poison the world's oil supply. The twist is, you can't jump. Instead, you must navigate the environment and use ramps and boosts and flips to reach higher areas. It's extremely tight and fun to master, and it was probably one of the most fun creative takes on platforming I have seen in years. So now it's your turn. Give me some indie game recommendations. What are the games that you have discovered that aren't getting enough attention? Leave them in the comments. Also, what was your first job? And was your experience different or similar to mine? I would love to know if someone's best job ever was their first, and if they've been chasing that ever since. Anyway, it's been a while since my last video, and that's mainly due to having the busiest winter in January I've ever had, and it's just not stopping. Until next time, be nice to yourself and lead with some kindness. See ya.